Chapter 377. Si walked out and happened to see Si Ting return. "Greetings, master." Si Ting cupped his fists and bowed. His chiseled face was a little tense. Si saw his expression and found it strange. "Si Ting, shouldn't you be at the academy today? Why you back now?" Si Ting hesitated for a moment. "I heard that something happened in the palace." "What happened? Why didn't I know?" Si was even more confused. He had been sending people to contact the palace. If something really happened, he should be the first to know. How did Si Ting know that he was at Tianlu Academy? Also, it doesn't look good. Si Ting looked at him and clenched his fists. Chu Luiwei didn't go to the academy today. He was summoned to the palace. So what? Si realized something the moment he spoke, and his expression changed. "You're saying that it has something to do with the fourth princess?" Si Ting nodded. "I felt that something was amiss, so I came back to take a look. I saw Eunuch Min standing at the door." Si Ting pursed his lips. Eunuch Min's expression wasn't good. At least, he had never seen such an expression on Eunuch Min's face after meeting him so many times. Also, this was clearly directed at the Si family. Si's heart gradually sank. Since the fourth princess was involved, His Majesty must have found out that they were secretly searching for Rongzhen. Si Meng might have been exposed as well. He hurriedly patted Si Ting's shoulder. "I'll go to the palace to take a look first. You stay at home. If anything happens, you'll be in charge of everything in the Si family." As he spoke, he took out a token and stuffed it into Si Ting's hands. Si Ting frowned. What had happened to make the patriarch so nervous? He even gave me the token that represents the Si family's master? "Master, I can't take this." "You should. Take it." Si's expression was very stern, and he didn't allow any rejection. Si Ting exchanged glances with him and suddenly realized that the current situation might be more troublesome and dangerous than he had imagined. He finally held the token tightly and nodded. "Don't worry. I'll protect the Si family." Only then did Si feel more at ease. He took a long look at Si Ting before turning to leave. Si Ting looked at his back. For some reason, the uneasiness in his heart started to spread. On the other side, Si followed Eunuch Min into the palace in a hurry. Along the way, he had tried several times to find out what was going on, but Eunuch Min was very tight-lipped and refused to divulge any information. This made Si even more certain of his guess. Something must have happened to the Empress. Otherwise, Eunuch Min would not have such an attitude. The two of them were silent the entire way. By the time they reached the imperial study, countless thoughts had already flashed through Si's mind. Si looked around without batting an eyelid. He immediately realized that the guards in the imperial study were much stricter than before. The overall atmosphere was also more solemn and dignified than before. His heart felt like it was hanging in the air, and he felt extremely uncomfortable. Eunuch Min stepped forward alone and said respectfully, "Your Majesty, Master Si has arrived." Emperor Jiaowen's cold voice came from the imperial study. "Let him in." Eunuch Min looked at Si and took a step back. "Master Si, this way please." Si took a deep breath in and tidied his clothes before walking forward and pushing the door open to enter. Once he walked in and saw the scene inside, Si's heart harshly skipped a beat. In the spacious and quiet imperial study, Emperor Jiawen was sitting behind the table. The booklets, brushes, and ink on the table were all swept to the floor, and it was a mess. The Empress, Si Huijing, was kneeling in front of him. Her extravagant palace gown was filled with dirt, and her usually neatly combed hair was also very messy. Her face was tear-stained, and her eyes were red and swollen. She knelt there, and her entire body was filled with despair and pain. Si had never seen her in such a pathetic state. "Her Majesty?" He couldn't help but shout as he hurriedly walked forward. But very quickly, he realized that Emperor Jiawen was still in the study. He hurriedly stopped in his tracks, turned around, and looked at Emperor Jiawen. He suppressed the waves in his heart and bowed. "Si greets your Majesty." When the Empress saw him, her dazed eyes moved, and her expression was very strange. It was as if she wanted to cry, but she couldn't cry anymore. She had cried for half her life, and she had almost cried dry today. However, this didn't make Emperor Jiawen's heart soften at all. Emperor Jiawen looked at Siyi with a heavy gaze. Siyi, do you know why I called you over? Siyi only felt a strong pressure coming over him. He knelt down almost without thinking. I don't know. Please enlighten me, Your Majesty. You don't know? Don't you know that the Si family was secretly searching for Rongzhen's whereabouts? Emperor Jiawen's voice was like a heavy hammer that harshly slammed down. Siyi clenched his fists tightly. As expected, His Majesty already knows. He immediately placed his hands on the floor and heavily knocked his forehead on the floor. I know my mistake. Please punish me, Your Majesty. You know your mistake? To think that I thought you were loyal to me. I didn't expect you to secretly work with the Empress and lie to me for so many years. You already knew about Si Meng's matter, right? See, you're really something. The more Emperor Jiawen spoke, the angrier he got. He actually picked up the remaining teacup beside him and suddenly threw it at Siyi. Bang! The teacup harshly landed in front of Siyi. The shards flew everywhere, and two of them quickly scratched Siyi's face, leaving bloody marks. However, Si didn't dare to move as he knelt even more respectfully. Your Majesty, I know my mistake, but all of this has nothing to do with Her Majesty. Back then, I was worried that Her Majesty couldn't protect herself in the palace, so I specially arranged for Si Meng. Also, regarding the fourth princess's disappearance, Her Majesty was afraid that you'd be too worried, so she wanted me to help. She didn't hide it on purpose. No matter what, I'm willing to bear all the consequences. Upon hearing this, Emperor Jiawen sneered. Bear all the consequences? Do you have the right? Siyi, you don't have to act in front of me. Rongzhen didn't even go missing. She was hidden by the Empress. Siyi was shocked and suddenly looked up. What? Upon seeing his reaction, Emperor Jiawen squinted his eyes. What? Your good sister didn't tell you? Siyi's heart was in a mess and he subconsciously looked at the Empress. Empress, what's going on? The Empress lowered her head. She knew that it was useless to say anything now. Rongzhen happened to appear at Heptagon Alley at that time, and she even said those words herself. Emperor Jiawen had already confirmed everything. She spoke in a hoarse voice. Your Majesty, my brother really knows nothing about this. Please let the Si family off. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 378. Siyi was confused as he listened at the side. Rongzhen didn't go missing. She was hidden by the Empress? But she didn't look like that at all. Besides, if she really wanted to do this, why would Si Meng die for no reason? He endured the pain and couldn't be bothered to wipe the blood off his face as he hurriedly begged. Your Majesty, even though I don't know who told you all this, it must be fake. Previously, the fourth princess and Si Meng went missing together, and Si Meng died very quickly. The Empress was worried about the fourth princess's safety, so she found me. I secretly sent people to search the entire imperial city, but they didn't find any traces of the fourth princess. Rongzhen said all this herself. Could she be lying? Emperor Jiawen's cold words made Siyi swallow his remaining words. He widened his eyes in shock and couldn't recover his senses for a long time. Rongzhen said it herself? Could it be that Rongzhen has been found? Looking at Siyi's expression, Emperor Jiawen thought to himself, he really doesn't seem to know about this. Otherwise, his acting skills are too good. Siyi had followed him for many years, so he more or less understood him. If Siyi was really involved in this matter, he definitely wouldn't have such a reaction. Emperor Jiawen's mood finally calmed down a little. As the head of the Si family, the head of the four major families, Siyi's identity was very important. Unless it was a critical moment, Emperor Jiawen wasn't willing to touch him. If not, the entire imperial city would be shaken. That was also the reason why he chose to deal with such a major matter in such a low-key manner. Siyi, the Empress has already admitted that she killed Si Meng and sent Rongzhen to Heptagon Alley to frame the Chu family. Do you have anything to say about this? Siyi was dazed. The Empress killed Si Meng? How is this possible? All these years, The Empress trusted and relied on Si Meng a lot. What good does it do to kill him? Besides, why did she send Rongzhen to Heptagon Alley? Hasn't that place been abandoned for many years? Faced with Emperor Jiawen's stern questioning, Si Ye's heart thumped, and he couldn't help but look at the Empress at the side. Empress, is what His Majesty said true? The Empress's face didn't change at all. She just nodded stiffly. She only hoped that the Si family wouldn't be implicated, so even if she wasn't the one who did it, she had to admit it. Moreover, with the bronze cauldron in Heptagon Alley, these matters were nothing. I'm afraid that Emperor Jiawen has already cut me into pieces in his heart. Si Yi was shocked. He asked almost subconsciously, why? The Empress lowered her eyes, seemingly not intending to continue speaking. Emperor Jiawen chided her. Why aren't you saying anything? If you can do it, why can't you say it now? Tell Si Yi what good things you did in Heptagon Alley. Si Yi had never seen Emperor Jiawen so angry before, and he couldn't help but be shocked. Previously, when Si Meng and Rongzhen were mentioned, Emperor Jiawen had been holding it in. Why did he suddenly have such a huge reaction when Heptagon Alley was mentioned? It seems like the Heptagon Alley incident is more intolerable to Emperor Jiawen than Si Meng's existence and hiding Rongzhen. The Empress's pale and cracked lips trembled. Your Majesty, I did all these myself, and it has nothing to do with my brother or the entire Si family. If this matter continues, it will only become more troublesome. Please give me a swift end and end it. Emperor Jiawen chuckled. Now you know how troublesome it is? When you did it back then, did you think that this day would come? It's not impossible for you to end it. You just have to make it clear whether the bronze cauldron was prepared for Rongjin or not. And why are you doing this? Si Yi was confused when he heard this. What bronze cauldron? Why is Rongjin involved in this? The Empress bit her lips tightly. Actually, Emperor Jiawen had asked her this question many times. However, she never admitted it. She knew better than anyone else how much Emperor Jiawen hated the bronze cauldron. Hence, once I admit it, Rongjin will never be able to make a comeback. Thinking of this, her heart was completely drowned in despair. The next moment, she suddenly slammed against the wall at the side. Emperor Jiawen stood up angrily. Stop her! Si Yi had long rushed over when the Empress moved and blocked in front of her. The Empress harshly slammed her head into Si Ye's arms. Don't. Si Yi let out a muffled groan as a sweet and fishy taste surged into his mouth. The Empress actually really wants to kill me. She used all her strength this time. What are you doing? Si Yi was angry and anxious as he directly shouted the Empress's name. The Empress grabbed his hand and anxiously begged. Brother, kill me. Quickly kill me. As long as she died, everything would be over. But how could Si Yi bear to do it? What exactly happened to you? Emperor Jiawen looked on coldly at the side. Empress, do you think I can't do anything to you if you don't say anything? Then he suddenly raised his voice and shouted. Guards, bring me a brush and ink. He had smashed most of the things on the table and they couldn't be used anymore. However, the imperial study didn't lack these things at all. Eunuch Min hurriedly came in from outside as if he didn't see the disheveled Si Yi and the Empress on the ground. He silently walked to the other side, took out a new brush, and presented it to Emperor Jiawen. Then he very consciously started to grind the ink. Emperor Jiawen picked up the brush and nonchalantly glanced at the Empress. I think you can't continue to be the Empress. As for Rongjin, with a mother like you, what kind of son can he teach? He can't take on such a big responsibility. I should have removed him long ago. The Empress suddenly realized that Emperor Jiawen didn't just want to remove the Empress, he also wanted to remove the Crown Prince. In her panic, she couldn't help but scream. Your Majesty, you mustn't. Rongjin just got engaged with Situ Xingqian. If you remove the Crown Prince now, how are you going to explain to country Xing Luo? Emperor Jiawen paused in his actions and sneered. I see. No wonder they're so fearless. They actually thought of how to get away with it right from the start. It turns out that Rongjin successfully fought for the marriage agreement with Situ Xingqian just for this day. Emperor Jiawen hated himself for being blind for so many years. He actually let such a vicious mother and son lie to him for so long. But I do want to see if country Xing Luo will continue to maintain the marriage agreement between Situ Xingchen and Rong Jin after knowing about this. Country Xing Luo. Situ Xingchen returned to the palace at the fastest speed possible and recounted everything that had happened in detail. However, country Xing Luo's Emperor Xian Kong, Situ Yen, kept quiet for a long time before shaking his head. Xingchen, this marriage agreement can't be cancelled. Digression, I forgot how to address the Emperor of country Xing Luo and his name. Using this chapter as the basis, I'll change the previous chapters together. It was hard to believe that in the early summer when mosquitoes appeared, I used 4 heating pads in one day. Mobile users, please browse and read, a better reading experience from love. Chapter 379. Your Highness, this move is really ingenious. Chu Luiyue looked at the chessboard in front of her, but the black chess piece in her hand didn't move. Almost all my black chess pieces are blocked. Rong Xiu sat opposite her quietly. Upon hearing this, his thin red lips curved up slightly. You clearly have another path to take, right? Chu Luiyue could obviously tell. But even if I take this step and barely break out of my current predicament, Your Highness, didn't you already prepare an inescapable trap? Since I'm going to lose anyway, there's no point in taking this extra step. Chu Luiyue threw the chess piece back into the chess pot and raised her hands. I admit defeat. Looking at her obedient manner, Rong Xiu raised his brows slightly. You're not focused. What are you thinking about? As he spoke, he started to put away the chess pieces. Chu Luiyue looked at his slow movements and couldn't help but wrinkle her nose. Actually, even if she was focused, she would barely be able to fight Rong Xiu to a draw. If they really wanted to compare, Rong Xiu was indeed better. Rong Xiu slowly said, this move seems to be very simple. This step may seem meaningless, but there will be people who will take it. Chu Luiyue snorted. It's just a waste of effort. Not only did Situ Yen not cancel Rong Jin and Situ Xingchen's marriage agreement, but he even took the initiative to ask for mercy. Even if His Majesty was furious and couldn't wait to punish the Empress and Crown Prince, he had to give Situ Yen some face. Chu Luiyue had long expected that Situ Yen wouldn't cancel the marriage agreement easily, but she didn't expect him to help so decisively. It could be seen that Situ Yen thought highly of Rong Jin. Rong Xiu smiled lightly. If the problem could be solved so easily, it wouldn't have dragged until today. Chu Luiyue suddenly leaned forward, placed her hands on the chessboard, and stared at Rong Xiu. Your Highness, did you already know that Situ Yen would help? Rong Xiu raised his eyes slightly and glanced at Chu Luiyue's face with a faint smile. Didn't you already know? Between the two of them, there seemed to be some kind of ambiguous air flowing slowly. Chu Luiyue looked at Rong Xiu thoughtfully. Of course she knew. However, the reason why she made such a guess was purely because she knew something. But what about Rong Xiu? He knew about it too? Chu Luiyue paused. Because of Situ Yan's help, His Majesty hasn't deposed the Crown Prince yet. Even the Empress hasn't been officially deposed. However, many people had already sensed that something wasn't right. Now, all kinds of guesses were running rampant, and people's hearts were shaken. His Majesty ordered a thorough investigation of Heptagon Alley, but there hasn't been any progress. Your Highness, what exactly do you plan to do? Rong Xiu kept all the chess pieces and looked at Chu Luiyue's curious face. He couldn't help but lower his head and kiss her forehead lightly. Even though taking an extra step won't win you, it will make it more exciting. Besides, that way, you'll be able to win more happily. Crown Prince Mansion. As Rong Jin was under house arrest again, the entire Crown Prince Mansion's atmosphere became very solemn. Everyone was dejected and lifeless. They didn't have the smug look that the Crown Prince had when he was in the limelight. Who would have thought that the Crown Prince that everyone envied would end up in such a state? Even though His Majesty hadn't given any orders, rumors were spreading in the imperial city. Everyone said that even the Empress was under house arrest this time, and it was only a matter of time before the Crown Prince was deposed. Chu Xianmin sat in her room. It was already late autumn, and the weather gradually turned cold. Her residence was cold and cheerless. like a cellar in the dead of winter. Her hands slowly touched the veil on her face. Even though she was the only one here, she didn't dare to show her face. This was because even she was afraid of seeing that face. Back then, when had she ever thought that she would end up like this? She thought for a long time and finally stood up. She heard that Situ Xingqian was visiting Crown Prince Mansion today, so she had to go and greet her. When she walked outside, the road was terrifyingly quiet. It wasn't much better than her place. She walked all the way to the front hall. After walking for a distance, she finally saw people on the road. Most of them were servants, but these people only bowed to her hastily when they saw her and hurriedly left. Chu Xianmin couldn't help but mock herself. When these people met her in the past, they would think of ways to tease her. Now, they couldn't even be bothered to do that. She could vaguely hear those people's whispers. I really don't know what eldest Princess Situ wants. Now that the Crown Prince and Her Majesty are under house arrest, they will be deposed sooner or later. She still hasn't cancelled her marriage agreement with the Crown Prince. Isn't she finding trouble for herself? Who knows? Maybe she's infatuated with him and is willing to die for him? I don't think so. You didn't see how eldest princess treated the Crown Prince. I just went in to serve tea, but I didn't see any smile on her face. She said that she's here to visit the Crown Prince, but anyone who saw her would think that she was forced to come. Who can force her? She's the apple of country Xing Luo's emperor's eye. Anyway, with her around, His Majesty won't do anything to the Crown Prince for the time being. But I think we should find another way out. This Crown Prince's palace, it was hard to say when it would completely change. I heard that His Majesty has been treating the third prince very well recently. He seems to be planning to make him a prince. Chu Xianmin clenched her teeth and walked forward. In the front hall, Rong Jin and Situ Xingqian sat opposite each other. After experiencing the past few days, Rong Jin had lost a lot of weight and looked very haggard. Even his last bit of energy was almost depleted. He was worried about the Empress and himself. He was anxious for a few days and nights, so he naturally became like this. Luckily, he still kept his position as the Crown Prince. Xingqian, I really don't know how to thank you. Rong Jin looked at Situ Xingqian in front of him with a face full of gratitude. I knew you wouldn't sit by and do nothing. In Rong Jin's opinion, Situ Yen must have been willing to help because Situ Xingqian had begged him. Hence, he treasured Situ Xingqian even more in his heart. However, Situ Xingqian didn't think so. Being stared at by Rong Jin with such a gaze, she felt goosebumps all over her body, and she almost couldn't sit still. If it weren't for father's orders, I wouldn't have come no matter what. Your Highness, you don't have to be so polite. This is what I should do. Situ Xingqian almost clenched her teeth and spat out this sentence. However, Rong Jin didn't notice her thoughts at all as he sighed deeply and sighed. It's a pity that father thinks that mother is guilty and won't let me see her. I also don't know what's going on with her. Situ Xingqian was impatient to listen to this. She recalled her former father's instructions and asked softly in a seemingly unintentional manner, Your Highness, His Majesty is doing this because of Heptagon Alley. Do you know what's going on in there? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 380. Rong Jin knitted his brows. I don't know either. Mother didn't mention it to me before. That day, it was my first time at Heptagon Alley. As for the so-called bronze cauldron and the hundreds of skeletons, he had never heard of them before. Situ Xingqian knitted her brows undetectably and continued to ask, unwilling to give up. But if Her Majesty really did it, it should be for you. I said I don't know. Rong Jin retorted in disgust. Besides, Mother is just a woman in the palace. How can she do such a thing? Those skeletons belonged to cultivators, and there were even some outstanding warriors among them. However, Mother's cultivation talent was average, and she stayed in the palace for many years. With her abilities alone, it was impossible for her to complete this series of actions. In Rong Jin's eyes, all of this was Rong Jiao and the rest slander. Let's not talk about this and talk about Rong Zhen. Rong Zhen did go missing back then, and Mother was very worried about it. She even looked for him several times to discuss countermeasures. If Mother really sent Rongzhen to Heptagon Alley long ago, why did she have to act in front of me? Wasn't that a waste of time and energy? In Rongjin's impression, Mother had always trusted him. Since he was young, he knew that he was Mother's hope, and he carried her heavy burden. Mother could give up everything for him. Even if Mother hid it from the entire world, she would definitely treat him honestly. Hence, he never believed that Mother did those things from the start to the end. Father, you're just temporarily blinded. When I find out the truth, everything will naturally come to light. Rongjin clenched his teeth. Upon hearing this, Situ Xingqian sneered in her heart. Blinded? Rongjin could only say this to himself. The Empress's reaction that day was enough to explain the problem. Other than Rongzhen's strange appearance, everything else was clearly related to the Empress. Situ Xingqian rubbed the teacup but didn't drink it. She looked down at her reflection in the tea, and her eyes were cold. However, her voice was still as gentle as water. Your Highness, you're right. I don't believe in those things either. If not, you wouldn't have come out to help, right? Given the current situation, you have to think of a solution as soon as possible. If not, Her Majesty's life in the palace won't be good. Rongjin knitted his brows tightly. Then tell me, what should we do? Father refuses to see me now. Does your Highness know that Lord Chu Ning and the third prince are investigating Heptagon Alley together? If they really found out something, wouldn't it be easy for His Majesty to convict him? In other words, the future of you and the Empress is now in their hands. How could I not know that? Rongjin rubbed his face in frustration. Let's not talk about Chu Ning, but Rongjio has a deep grudge against me and my son. He will definitely take this opportunity to secretly do something. Your Highness, in my opinion, the crux of this matter lies in Heptagon Alley. I believe that those things were definitely not done by the Empress, but she definitely knows something, don't you think? Rongjin didn't say anything. If Her Majesty tells you everything she knows, then you'll be able to deal with the current situation better. So, why don't you go and consult the Empress? Rongjin pondered for a long time and felt that this was indeed a good idea. But the most troublesome thing was, but Imperial Mother and I can't see each other right now, so how can I ask? Situ Xingqian's lips curved up slightly, and she revealed a gentle smile. You forgot that Xingqian can enter the palace. Chu Xianmin, who had walked to the door, suddenly stood still when she heard this. Then, she heard Rongjin's excited voice. Xingqian, you're indeed the best woman in the world. It's my great fortune to be able to marry you as my crown princess. Chu Xianmin felt as if countless needles were pricking her heart, and it was very painful. She clenched her fists tightly, and many thoughts flashed across her mind. Finally, as if she had made up her mind, her gaze became firm, and she turned to leave. Chu Luiwei came to Mu Qinghe's residence again. Just as he walked to the door, he heard a joyful chirp. Chu Luiwei looked up and saw Hong Yao excitedly flapping its wings and flying over. Even though they had not seen each other for half a month, Chu Luiwei missed Hong Yao quite a bit. Seeing her welcoming him so enthusiastically, he couldn't help but smile. Hong Yao, have you been obedient recently? Hong Yao flew one round around Chu Luiwei and flapped its wings vigorously. Chu Luiwei even saw a faint layer of green fire. This was clearly an affirmative answer. Chu Luiwei smiled until his eyes turned into crescents. Don't worry. I didn't forget to bring you a gift. Hong Yao chirped happily again. Chu Luiwei took out her cosmic bag and was about to take out the item when she suddenly felt a gaze on her. It was almost tangible. She paused in her actions and looked up. Jian Fengqi crossed his arms and leaned against the door frame as he looked at her with interest. How strange. Hong Yao isn't your fiend. Why do you care so much about it? Chu Luiwei's eyes twitched. It's been more than 10 days. Why hasn't this fellow left yet? As if he had seen through Chu Luiwei's thoughts, Jian Fengqi smiled flirtatiously and proudly. It's easy to invite me here, but it's not so easy to ask me to leave. Chu Luiwei tried her best to look calm and polite as she curtsied. Greetings, young Master Jian. Jian Fengqi suddenly said, Do you know that Mu Qinghe only allows Hong Yao to accept gifts from one person? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 381. Chu Luiyue put away the Jianghu bag with a calm expression and smiled faintly. How would Lu Yu know about this kind of thing? Jian Fengqi's gaze fell on her hand. He raised his chin and smiled carelessly. Actually, that's not important. Anyway, it's all in the past. What did you bring for Hong Yao? Can I have a look? Chu Luiyue put the things back into the Jianghu bag without batting an eyelid. Young Master Jian, you must be joking. It's just some ordinary things. They're not worthy of your attention. Since you said that Vice Admiral Mu only allowed Hong Yao to receive a gift from one person, then I won't embarrass myself here. If I offend you, please forgive me. Hong Yao drooped its head in disappointment and immediately glared at Jian Fengqi. It's all his fault. If this guy hadn't suddenly appeared, it would definitely have gotten the gift. It had been waiting for half a month. Jian Fengqi's lips curled into an evil smile, and his eyebrows were naturally flirtatious. Miss Chu, why are you so nervous? I see that Mu Qinghe thinks quite highly of you. Who knows, maybe he'll make an exception for you. After all, the girl in front of him had a pair of eyes that were so similar to that person's. Chu Luiyue didn't want to continue talking about this with Jian Fengqi, so she quietly changed the topic. Thank you for your kindness, young Master Jian. In fact, I came here today to see if Vice Admiral Mu had come back. I came here once a few days ago, but you weren't here at that time. She guessed that Mu Qinghe must have encountered something at that time, because he always kept his promises. Since he said 10 days, there must be some special reasons why he didn't stay here to see her. Jian Fengqi looked at Chu Luiyue thoughtfully. For some reason, he always felt that Chu Luiyue didn't seem to want to talk to him much. The looming feeling of being despised came back again. How strange. He had always been very popular in front of women. He didn't know how he had offended Chu Luiyue to make her treat him like this. It seems like the women of country Yao Chen aren't very friendly to me. He let out a long sigh. Chu Luiyue narrowed his eyes and smiled politely. Young Master Jian, please don't misunderstand. I'm just worried that Vice Admiral Mu might have been delayed by something. I'm not displeased with you at all. Perhaps someone else made young Master Jian unhappy? It was obvious that he had suffered a setback somewhere. However, she was also curious. There were not many people who could suppress Jian Fengqi. Jian Fengqi's icy eyes were filled with resentment. He wanted to say something but stopped himself. In the end, he swallowed the words in his throat and turned to walk inside. Forget it, forget it. This young master has never liked to fuss over such things. As he walked, he dragged out his words and spoke lazily. Mu Qinghe, the little girl is looking for you. Chu Luiyue inexplicably shuddered. Little girl? This guy must have eaten a bear's heart and a leopard's guts to call her that. Chu Luiyue secretly gritted her teeth and made a mental note of Jian Fengqi. She suppressed the unhappiness in her heart and followed him. Jian Fengqi casually waved his hand without turning his head. He's in the backyard. You can go by yourself. After saying that, he strode toward the other side, as if he couldn't be bothered to care about this. Chu Luiyue thanked him and walked toward the backyard. Seeing that Jian Fengqi had left, Hong Yao followed again. It circled Chu Luiyue and blinked its eyes, unwilling to give up. Since that guy is no longer here, I can give it the present, right? Chu Luiyue stared at it and shook her head. Hong Yao no. It was obvious that the only person Jian Fengqi mentioned who could give Hong Yao a present was her, the former Shangguanyu. In the past, she didn't know about this at all, so she said that she would bring a present for Hong Yao without any scruples. But now that she knew, she naturally couldn't do that anymore. Mu Qinghe had a lot of doubts about her, so she had to be cautious. Seeing her determined expression, Hong Yao lowered its wings in disappointment, landed on the ground, and walked forward step by step listlessly. Chu Luiyue pursed her lips, but she still didn't give in. In fact, she said that she would bring a present for Hong Yao at first just to coax it, but it gradually became a habit. But she never knew that Mu Qinghe would only let Hong Yao accept gifts from her alone. I really don't know what Mu Qinghe is thinking. Suddenly, Hong Yao stopped. Chu Luiyue looked up and saw that in the spacious backyard, Mu Qinghe was practicing with a saber. He said that he was practicing with a saber, but in fact, What he was holding in his hand was just an ordinary 3-inch wooden saber. Although it was just an ordinary wooden saber, in Wuxia's hand, it seemed to be filled with murderous intent. Even though there was still a distance between them, Chu Liwei could still feel the fierce aura that almost cut everything. Vice Admiral Mu. Chu Liwei saluted. Wuxia didn't stop, and his wooden saber danced smoothly. Chu Liwei could even see the black cracks in the void wherever the saber passed. It could be seen that Wuxia's strength was indeed stronger than before. Wuxia's movements were so fast that he left several afterimages in the courtyard. Immediately, he raised his hand and stabbed. The wooden saber in his hand flew out in an instant. Swoosh, swoosh. Those afterimages were pierced one after another. They dissipated with a loud bang. Chu Liwei knitted her brows unnoticeably. Wuxia didn't seem to be in a good mood. To put it nicely, he didn't show his emotions, but to put it bluntly, he had an icy face. In Chu Liwei's impression, she had almost never seen him reveal his emotions. But from his appearance just now, it seemed that he had encountered something terrible, but she didn't say anything, just stood quietly by the side and waited. Finally, when the last afterimage was pierced, the wooden saber flew back to Wuxia's hand. He slowly exhaled and looked back at Chu Liwei. At this time, his eyes were as cold and indifferent as ever, without the slightest fluctuation. Vice Admiral Mu, the last time I came, you weren't here, so… I know. Wuxia didn't wait for Chu Liwei to finish her explanation and interrupted her. Suddenly, he stared at Chu Liwei and sized her up. Chu Liwei blinked and smiled faintly. Vice Admiral Mu, why are you looking at me like that? Wuxia was silent for a moment, then suddenly said, It seems that your trip wasn't in vain. Chu Liwei was slightly stunned. She didn't break through this time, so where did Wuxia's words come from? Without waiting for her to ask, Wuxia suddenly threw the wooden saber in his hand at Chu Liwei. Swoosh! The wooden saber was wrapped in an astonishing force, and it went straight for Chu Liwei. Its speed was so fast that Chu Liwei didn't have time to dodge. Now, she could either be pierced or brace herself to receive it. Chu Liwei subconsciously turned sideways, and at the same time, reached out with her right hand. Wuxia's eyes suddenly sharpened. This movement, mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 382. Chu Liwei suddenly paused. Almost at the same time, two figures, one green and one red, quickly appeared in front of Chu Liwei. They were Hong Yao and Dumpling. Dumpling quickly went forward and went straight for the wooden saber. Its fluffy body easily landed on the wooden saber. In the next moment, it opened its mouth and bit down hard. Crack! With this crisp sound, a large piece of the wooden saber's blade was bitten off by Dumpling. On the other side, Hong Yao flapped its wings and a ball of green flame landed on the wooden saber. With a boom, it burst into flames. Dumpling sensed the movement and turned around to take a look. It saw that the green flame was almost burning its tail. It bared its teeth at Hong Yao angrily. Hong Yao threw it a provocative look. In the next moment, the two of them retreated. The wooden saber turned into a pile of ashes an arm's length away from Chu Liwei. Dumpling returned to Chu Liwei's shoulder first and showed its tail to Chu Liwei. Ow ow! That bird was too hateful. It was almost burned to death. Chu Liwei looked at it coldly. Yes, it burned 3 of its feathers. If you discovered it a little later, it would have grown back on its own. Dumpling was speechless. The red demon let out 2 clear cries and flapped its wings proudly. It deserved it. It was its fault for being so slow. It hadn't improved at all after such a long time. Dumpling was furious, but when it thought of how it had suffered because it was inferior to Hong Yao, it could only turn around angrily and point its butt at Hong Yao to show its anger. Actually, Chu Liwei really wanted to criticize Hong Yao for abusing her power for personal revenge, but she knew better in front of Wuxia. Besides, Hong Yao had attacked to help her. She slowly lowered her arm, and the tense muscles all over her body also relaxed. Wuxia's eyes flashed with disappointment. When he saw Chu Liyue's actions just now, he thought, what is Vice Admiral Mu planning to do? Chu Liyue didn't seem to notice anything wrong and said with a smile, I'm afraid you've overestimated me. I can't take one of your moves now. It's all thanks to Dumpling and Hong Yao. Mu Qinghe's face was a little cold as he gave Hong Yao a warning look. Hong Yao, who was still smug a moment ago, suddenly froze. It was too anxious just now. It rushed out just like that. Chu Liyue was a little nervous. It was only when she was about to make a move that she realized that Mu Qinghe was probably doing this to test her. People's instincts were very easy to be exposed. She was already halfway. Mu Qinghe would definitely notice that something was amiss if she fully displayed her movement technique. Luckily, Dumpling and Hong Yao attacked in time. Chu Liyue lightly patted Dumpling. She felt at ease when she felt the soft and furry touch. Follow me out. Chu Liyue nodded. Chu Liyue was dazed. Now. Mu Qinghe glanced at her. Why? Do you have other things to do? Chu Liyue shook her head. Even if there was, Mu Qinghe probably wouldn't care. After all, nobody dared to offend him here. Even Emperor Zhouwen had to make way for him, let alone others. Mu Qinghe nodded and walked outside. Chu Liyue hesitated for a moment but still followed. Vice Admiral Mu, may I ask where we're going? You'll know when we get there. Mu Qinghe's reply was very cold and arbitrary. She clearly didn't give Chu Liyue any room to bargain. Chu Liyue knitted her brows. Mu Qinghe has always done things like this, so I'm not surprised. But, if I don't even know where we're going, I'll feel uncomfortable. However, Mu Qinghe clearly didn't intend to explain to me. When they reached the front yard, Jian Fengqi suddenly walked out. Oh, where are you bringing the little girl? He smiled and teased. Mu Qinghe coldly glanced at him. This isn't something you should interfere in. Jian Fengqi raised his hands. This isn't the time for you to invite me over. Mu Qinghe, you're getting better at kicking me to the curb after I've outlived my usefulness. He was clearly just teasing, but Mu Qinghe's expression suddenly stiffened for a moment. Jian Fengqi also seemed to realize something. He coughed and turned his gaze to Chu Liyue. Miss Chu, there's something I'd like to ask. Please speak, young Master Jian. Jian Fengqi rubbed his chin with one hand and seemed to be in a dilemma. Is this young master ugly? Chu Liyue thought she heard wrong and slightly widened her eyes. But when she saw Jian Fengqi's thoughtful expression, she was sure that he really did say that. What's wrong with this guy? Who doesn't know that Jian Fengqi's second best skill is alchemy and his first best skill is narcissism? Jian Fengqi's naturally flirtatious eyes and free and unrestrained style. Even Chu Liyue, who always disliked him, had to admit that Jian Fengqi's charm and appearance were indeed top-notch. Otherwise, how could he come and go freely among the flowers? Young Master Jian is handsome and elegant. Naturally, you have nothing to do with the word ugly. Jian Fengqi's straight brows knitted even tighter. I think so too, but someone said that this young master is ugly. Chu Liyue asked curiously. I wonder who that person is. What kind of insight is this? Jian Fengqi's gaze became very subtle and his thin lips spat out a name. Mu Hongyu. Chu Liyue was speechless. It seems that a lot of interesting things have happened while I was away. Jian Fengqi had always been a person who thought highly of himself and was especially confident in his appearance. He had lived for so many years, but this should be the first time that someone called him ugly. No wonder he was so resentful. Unfortunately, according to Mu Hongyu's personality, this kind of person was the last person she liked. This was also because Jian Fengqi had cured the princess consort of Pingzhang's illness. Mu Hongyu must have said this because she couldn't bear it anymore. One could imagine how much Mu Hongyu didn't like Jian Fengqi. Chu Liyue came to a realization and comforted him with a smile. Hongyu has always been outspoken. Don't take it to heart. Jian Fengqi was speechless. She didn't seem to be comforting him. I heard from her that there's someone called Rong Xiu who is dozens of times more charming than me? Chu Liyue's mouth twitched. If she didn't hear wrongly, Rong Xiu? Oh, by the way, she also said that person is your fiancé? Jian Fengqi stared at Chu Luiyue and asked. Only then did Chu Luiyue realize that Jian Fengqi hadn't seen Rong Xiu since he came here. She coughed. Yes. His Highness Prince Li is indeed my fiancé. Jian Fengqi thought for a moment and suddenly walked outside. I'd like to see what kind of person that Rong Xiu is. Chu Luiyue was about to say something when there was a sudden movement from the side. She turned her head to take a look. A long sword suddenly floated in the air. Mu Qinghe was standing on it with a solemn and cold expression. Come up. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 383. Palace. Imperial Study. Emperor Zhouwen looked at the book in his hands, and the more he read, the more tightly he knitted his brows. Finally, he threw the book aside without a sound. Chu Ning, I asked you to search Heptagon Alley with all your might, but you only found these useless things? Chu Ning, who was respectfully standing with his hands by his side, immediately knelt down and said, Your Majesty, Your Majesty. I've already used all my connections and methods, but I can only find out this much. Even though there are hundreds of skeletons in Heptagon Alley, other than recognizing that they're all cultivators, I can't find any other information about their identities. Anything that can reveal their identities has been specially taken care of, and I can't find anything at all. Other than the hanging corpse, the other skeletons don't even have a single piece of clothing on them. The person who did this was clearly very careful. Chu Ning didn't sleep or rest these few days and even dug 3 feet into Heptagon Alley. However, other than piles of skeletons, he really didn't find anything else. Emperor Zhouwen rubbed his glabella in frustration. He knew that this matter wouldn't be so easily investigated, and there was no point in sitting here and being anxious. However, once he thought of the bronze cauldron stained with dried, dark red blood, he would be filled with worry. Chu Ning glanced at Emperor Zhouwen and continued speaking. Refuse to investigate. Her Majesty goes to Heptagon Alley once every 2 months on average, and she's very secretive. She only stays there for a short while, so nobody discovered her after such a long time. Emperor Zhouwen's face darkened. In actual fact, he had personally interrogated the Empress a few times, but the Empress was very tight-lipped. From start to end, she only said that she did everything, but she didn't mention if she prepared it for Rong Jin or why she did it. In the middle, with Emperor Zhouwen's silent approval, his subordinates even tortured the Empress, but they still didn't find any useful clues. Whenever he thought about how the Empress had deceived him for so many years without him noticing, he felt a chill run from the bottom of his feet to his head, causing him to shudder. Knock knock. Your Majesty, the third prince wishes to see you. Eunuch Min carefully said outside. Let him in. Emperor Zhouwen took a deep breath in and looked at Rong Jiu, who pushed the door open and asked, What's the news? Do you have any news? The moment Rong Jiu came in and saw Chu Ning kneeling on the floor, he realized that Chu Ning probably didn't find anything. He first bowed respectfully and then slowly said, I'm sorry. Your son has personally interrogated all the servants in the Empress Palace and obtained some information that might be useful. Emperor Zhouwen finally perked up. Speak. Rong Jiu said, according to the Empress' personal maid, the Empress keeps a box for herself and never allows anyone else to touch it. Every once in a while, the Empress would lock herself in her bedroom. At first, the palace servants didn't think much of it. Later, a eunuch accidentally broke in and finally found that the Empress was inside and seemed to be looking at the things in the box. Emperor Zhouwen pondered for a moment. What kind of box is it? Why does she value it so much? Why didn't I know about it? Rong Jiu sneered in his heart. Emperor Zhouwen and the Empress didn't have any feelings for each other, especially Emperor Zhouwen. He probably didn't even put 10% of his thoughts on the Empress. If he cared about the Empress before, he wouldn't let the Empress do so many messy things under his nose. The Empress frequently went in and out of Heptagon Alley and kept killing cultivators to accumulate strength for the bronze cauldron. Even Emperor Zhouwen didn't know, let alone a small box. It was really too easy to hide it from Emperor Zhouwen. Thinking of this, Rong Jiu couldn't help but mock himself. It was also because of this that the Empress didn't receive any punishment even after silently killing his mother. Emperor Jiawen didn't treat his mother any better. Rongjio suppressed his emotions and looked calm. I didn't ask about this. After all, the palace servants don't dare to ask about the Empress's things. But the eunuch who accidentally discovered this incident fell into the lake and drowned not long after. After that, the Empress's palace servants kept their mouths shut about this incident. This time, he had to use some tricks to finally get the answer he wanted. I think that if we can find that box, many problems can be solved. Emperor Jiawen looked solemn. You're saying that the box has something to do with Heptagon Alley? This is only your son's guess. In the current situation where there are no other clues, this is the only feasible path. Emperor Jiawen thought for a while and felt that this made sense. Since this is the case, Rongjio, go find the Empress and ask her to hand the item over. Rongjio hesitated. Father, since Her Majesty values that box so much, she probably won't hand it over easily. Tell her that if she honestly hands it over, I might give Rongjin a chance. If she's stubborn, let her decide what to do. An undetectable cold glint flashed across Rongjio's eyes. Yes, Your Majesty. With that, he quickly excused himself. Emperor Jiawen looked at Chuning helplessly. Chuning, you have to hurry up on your side. If you really can't do it, start from other areas. Go and check all the people who have close contact with the Empress and Rongjin. Yes. After Chuning left, Emperor Jiawen then relaxed his body and leaned against the chair. Chuning is good at everything, but he doesn't have enough means. In comparison, Rongjio's work efficiency was much higher. After all, he was trained in the Northwest Army. Thinking of this, Emperor Jiawen vaguely felt uncomfortable in his heart. In the past, he never thought of leaving the position for Rongjio because he really didn't like this son of his. Besides, his murderous aura was too strong, and it even made Emperor Jiawen wary sometimes. But now, it seems like Rongjin can't do it. Among the remaining princes, Rongjio actually became the most suitable one. Even if he's cold and murderous, it's better than being weak and useless. What a pity, Emperor Jiawen sighed as if he was instantly 10 years old. If only Rongjio's health was better. In the Empress's bedroom, the once bustling and prosperous place disappeared in the blink of an eye, and it was now cold and lonely. Only heavy guards were left, trapping the Empress here. When Situ Xingshan arrived here, her heart couldn't help but skip a beat. Emperor Jiawen actually hates the Empress so much that he's so guarded against her. A guard saw Situ Xingshan and immediately went forward. Eldest Princess Situ, please stop. His Majesty has ordered that nobody is allowed to come close. Situ Xingshan took out a token from her sleeves and put on the dignified posture of an eldest princess. I'm here on orders. That guard took a look and recognized that it was indeed His Majesty's token. He hurriedly moved aside. Eldest Princess Situ, please. Situ Xingshan put away the token and calmly walked into the Empress's palace. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Yuan. Chapter 384. The huge palace was cold and cheerless. Situ Xingshan slowly walked in, and her footsteps echoed in the empty room, making it sound eerie. The floor was filled with all sorts of smashed items, and it was a mess. Situ Xingshan walked around expressionlessly and went straight in. Finally, she saw the Empress in the innermost part of the room. The Empress was wearing a messy and dirty palace gown, and it looked like she hadn't changed for a few days. She could even vaguely see some dark red bloodstains. Her face was very pale, her lips were dry, and her eyes were dull. She was curled up into a ball at the corner of the bed, motionless. When one looked over, one would think that the Empress was dead. It was obvious that the Empress had gone through a lot of torture in these few days. Situ Xingshan walked over step by step and finally stood in front of the Empress's bed. Her usual gentle smile surfaced on her face. Her Majesty, I'm here to see you. The Empress didn't seem to hear her and didn't react at all. Situ Xingshan didn't care as she bent down slightly and went closer. Actually, but the next moment, she smelled the Empress's horrible and suffocating smell. Disgust flashed across her eyes as she took out a letter from her sleeve and handed it over. Her Majesty, the Crown Prince asked me to come and see you today. This is the letter he wrote for you. Take a look at it. After saying that, he calmly straightened his body. If she could, she really wanted to leave this dirty place immediately, but she didn't forget her purpose for coming today. It wasn't easy to come in, so she had to grab the chance. Hearing the words Crown Prince, the Empress's eyes turned sluggishly before she finally regained some consciousness. She slowly raised her head, and her deeply sunken eyes were filled with blood vessels. They were filled with despair and anger, and there was even a hint of madness vaguely. Situ Xingqian instinctively took half a step back. The Empress's appearance is really too scary. The Empress suddenly let out a vague chuckle as if she was mocking Situ Xingqian, but it also seemed like she was mocking herself. Even without looking in the mirror, she knew what she looked like now. "How did you come in?" asked the Empress with a hoarse voice. It was as if something had been dragged across the sand, and it was so abrasive that it hurt one's eardrums. Situ Xingqian calmed herself down and softly explained. "His Highness lent me his command medallion. As the Crown Prince, Rong Jin had a token that was similar to Emperor Jiaowen's. He changed the token a little, and it looked 90% similar. Apart from the people who often saw these two tokens, no one else could tell them apart at a glance. This was why Situ Xingqian could enter so smoothly. Only then did the Empress believe him and pick up the letter. But after reading 2 lines, she suddenly crumpled the letter into a ball and harshly threw it at Situ Xingqian's face. "Bitch! You are indeed insidious." Situ Xingqian did not expect the Empress to suddenly flare up, so she was momentarily stunned. The paper ball didn't hurt when it hit her face, but it was a great humiliation to her. She picked up the ball of paper, and the smile on her face faded. "Your Majesty, what are you doing? I was kind enough to help you and the Crown Prince, but you treat me like this? Bitch! Do you think this consort doesn't know what you're thinking?" The Empress's face flushed red as she pointed at Situ Xingqian's nose and scolded her. "Rong Jin can't tell what you're thinking, but do you think I can't tell? No wonder you haven't cancelled the marriage agreement until now. It's because you want to persuade him to get this information from me. I'm telling you, don't even think about it. Even though I'm down and about to be executed anytime, it doesn't mean that I'm dumb. Previously, when I saw Situ Xingqian, I already felt that this woman's thoughts weren't pure and that she wasn't what she looked like on the surface. It seems like this is indeed the case." The smile on Situ Xingqian's face completely disappeared as she tightly clenched the paper ball in her hands. That was Rong Jin's handwritten letter, and he wrote it under her hints. Of course, she knew what was written on it. The general idea was that Rong Jin couldn't go out because he was under house arrest, so he asked Situ Xingqian to visit the Empress on his behalf. He also asked the Empress to tell Situ Xingqian the secret of Heptagon Alley so that she could relay it to him. Rong Jin felt that he could only think of a solution to solve his current predicament if he knew what was going on. When the Empress saw this, how could she not understand? Situ Xingqian originally had nothing to do with this matter, but she was now busy. How could she not have any ulterior motives? "Her Majesty, you must have misunderstood. I don't have such intentions. The Crown Prince is your biological son. If you don't even trust him, won't this situation be unsolvable? Get lost!" yelled the Empress hysterically. "If it weren't for the fact that half of my body couldn't move, I would have directly gone forward and hit this B****. Situ Xingqian's gaze landed on the Empress's legs, and she vaguely guessed something as she said with disappointment, "I thought you loved the Crown Prince the most. I originally thought that you doted on the Crown Prince the most. I didn't expect that you could bear to watch him fall into such a desperate situation. Since you insist on this, then I have no other choice." As she spoke, she really turned around and left without a care. She had just taken a few steps when she heard the Empress's voice behind her. "What did you just say?" Situ Xingqian's lips curled up slightly, and delight flashed across her eyes. But when she turned around, her expression had already returned to normal. She sighed and said, "You've been trapped in the palace for a long time. You probably don't know that His Majesty has already decided to remove the crown prince and appoint the third prince as the crown prince. The Empress was stunned. Impossible! I know that you don't trust me, but there's no other way now that things have come to this. If you don't believe me, you can ask the people in your palace if they've all been captured by the third prince for interrogation. Can't you guess why His Majesty wants to hand this matter to the third prince? Situ Xingqian's voice was as gentle as usual, but it was like a cold, poisonous snake slowly crawling into the Empress's heart. Her lips trembled violently, and her entire body started shaking very quickly. No. Rongzhen is the crown prince. Rongzhen is the only crown prince. Seeing the Empress's reaction, confusion flashed across Situ Xingqian's heart. Why does she care so much about this matter? I'm going to find His Majesty. He can't appoint someone else as the crown prince. The Empress screamed and directly fell off the bed. Only Rongjin. It has to be Rongjin. Situ Xingqian suddenly realized something and purposely said, the third prince is outstanding. If he's appointed as the crown prince, the public will be convinced. What do you know? Shouted the Empress sharply with a hideous face. Who does Rongjio think he is? Rongjin is heaven's chosen son. Other than him, nobody else is fit to be the crown prince. Digression. The backstage reaction is really slow. Recently, we've changed to a new comment section, and everyone is still used to it. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 385. Situ Xingqian's eyes lit up. Heaven's chosen son. This is the biggest secret hidden in Rongjin. Once the words left her mouth, the Empress immediately reacted. I still said this out loud. Furthermore, I said it in front of Situ Xingqian. Bang. Cut. The Empress was furious as she picked up the things beside her and threw them at Situ Xingqian. You be ****. How dare you scheme against me? She had kept this secret for many years and didn't even tell anyone about the torture she had suffered these few days. She didn't expect Situ Xingqian to find out in the end. The Empress's hand was cut by the sharp shards, and it was covered in blood. However, she couldn't feel the pain at all as her mind was filled with thoughts of how to kill Situ Xingqian in front of her. But the current her was a useless person. She couldn't even walk on her own, so how could she deal with Situ Xingqian? Situ Xingqian easily avoided her attack, but she didn't retreat. Instead, she took 2 steps forward and squatted down in front of the Empress. Her Majesty, did you just say? Heaven's chosen son? What does that mean? The Empress raised her hand and was about to slap her. Situ Xingqian grabbed her wrist with a smile on her face, but the corners of her eyes were filled with iciness and threat. Since you've already said it, why don't you tell me everything? Don't worry, I'll definitely tell His Highness everything without leaving out a single word. I'm guessing that this is the reason why my father wants me to get engaged to His Highness, right? The blood in the Empress's chest rumbled as she suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. I didn't guess wrongly. Situ Xingqian is up to no good. There was also her sinister and cunning imperial father. Who the hell told you? The Empress tried her best to break free from Situ Xingqian, but it was to no avail. In the end, she could only scream at her. I've never told anyone about this. Even Rongjin, I only revealed a bit of information. Until now, I still don't know what it means. But how did that old fool Situ Yen find out? Many things that had happened in the past quickly flashed before his eyes, like pearls that were finally strung together by a string. No wonder Situ Yen interacted and suggested a marriage. No wonder they liked Rongjin from the start. No wonder the engagement hasn't been annulled yet. This treacherous father and daughter pair had come for this very reason. Situ Xingqian's ears buzzed from the Empress's ruckus, and she had completely exhausted her last bit of patience. She shook off the Empress and looked down at her. Your Majesty, there doesn't seem to be any point in talking about this now. Why don't you just say what you need to say? Only then can you protect the crown prince, right? Besides, if it weren't for my father and my help, you and the crown prince wouldn't have survived until today. Now, we can be considered to be on the same boat. Why must you persist so bitterly? Don't tell me you still want to salvage the situation by yourself, with your half-crippled body? Situ Xingshan wasn't polite with her words. The Empress was filled with hatred. But after thinking about it for a long time, she realized that Situ Xingshan's words made sense. It wasn't a good idea to continue resisting like this. She had worked so hard and put in so much effort to get to where she was today. How could she let all her efforts go to waste? After a long silence, she finally looked up at Situ Xingshan. If you want this consort to tell you, it's not impossible. However, you have to swear on it. If you betray Rongjin and me in the future, may lightning strike you to death. Situ Xingshan was elated. What's so scary about swearing? As long as I know what the so-called Heaven's Chosen Son means, I have ways to solve this problem. Okay. Situ Xingshan, swear here. Greetings, Third Prince. A voice was suddenly heard from outside the palace. Situ Xingshan was shocked and immediately looked outside. Why is Rongjio here at this time? How's Her Majesty today? This is clearly Rongjio's voice. Your Majesty, Her Majesty is still the same as before. She stays in the palace and refuses to come out. I'll go in and take a look. As Rongjio spoke, he walked into the palace. The guards all knew that Rongjio was sent by His Majesty to investigate the Empress, so they directly let him in. The footsteps got closer and closer. Situ Xingshan started to panic. If Rongjio finds out that I'm here, everything will be exposed. She hurriedly leaned in front of the Empress and softly said, Your Majesty, you know what to do. For the Crown Prince, you should know what to do. Then she immediately found a place to hide. The door was pushed open, and Rongjio's figure appeared at the entrance. Rongjio immediately saw the situation in the palace. He squinted his eyes. Her Majesty, what's wrong with you? Mu Qinghe brought Chu Luiwei on her sword and headed north. As they had set up a barrier, the two of them didn't attract anyone's attention as they silently left the imperial city. Seeing that they were out of the city gate, Chu Luiwei found it even stranger. Where exactly is Mu Qinghe bringing me? This direction. Normally, nobody would come here because there are many mountains here, and the terrain is dangerous. More importantly, if we continue forward, we'll reach Country Yao Chen's imperial mausoleum. However, Mu Qinghe had been silent, so she couldn't ask anything. The two of them continued forward like this. When she saw the extremely steep mountain peak, Chu Luiwei finally confirmed her guess. Mu Qinghe brought me to Country Yao Chen's imperial mausoleum. Looking down from midair, one could even clearly see the soldiers in charge of guarding the mountain peak. A faintly discernible barrier enveloped the entire mountain peak within it. Chu Luiwei was secretly shocked. This barrier's strength is much stronger than I expected. It's as if a stage 6 warrior set it up. An idea popped up in Mu Qinghe's mind, and she finally brought Chu Luiwei to the foot of the mountain. After Chu Luiwei stood still, she suppressed the doubts in her heart and looked up. Golden Inheritance Peak. This was the highest and most dangerous mountain peak within 50 kilometers of the imperial city. Country Yao Chen's past emperors were all buried in the imperial mausoleum at the foot of this mountain peak. At first glance, it was like a sword had landed from the sky and harshly pierced into the ground. Sharp, majestic, disdainful. Chu Luiwei had never been here before. The reason why she knew about this place was because the appearance of Golden Inheritance Peak was extremely similar to the iconic sharp sword sculpture outside Tianlu Academy. Back then, she had inadvertently discovered this and had been secretly surprised for a long time. Vice Admiral Mu, why did you bring me here? Chu Luiwei turned to look at Mu Qinghe. However, Mu Qinghe's expression was a little secretive. He stared at Golden Inheritance Peak for a long time before speaking in a deep voice. Enter the Imperial Mausoleum. Digression, I'm going to eat noodles. It's so tiring. Let's talk about losing weight tomorrow. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 386. Chu Luiwei thought that he had heard wrongly. What? Mu Qinghe lifted his chin. I'll open the barrier later. It won't attract anyone's attention. You can just follow me in. Chu Luiwei was dumbfounded. After all this time, Mu Qinghe was really going to enter the Imperial Mausoleum. Vice Admiral Mu, this isn't very appropriate, right? We're not from country Yao Chen's royal family. How can we casually enter a place like the Imperial Mausoleum? The problem wasn't whether it would attract anyone's attention, but that it wasn't right at all. Mu Qinghe glanced coldly at Chu Luiwei. He didn't show any anger. You don't want to go? Chu Luiwei was speechless. It's not that I don't want to go, but… Vice Admiral Mu, you have to have a reason for doing this, right? Chu Luiwei racked his brains, but he couldn't understand why Mu Qinghe would suddenly do this. Firstly, no one in country Yao Chen had offended Mu Qinghe, so there was no need for him to dig up their ancestral graves. Secondly, even if there were any treasures hidden in the Imperial Mausoleum, Mu Qinghe wouldn't be interested in them. He had a distinguished status in the Tianling dynasty, so what kind of rare items had he not seen before? Why did he have to barge into a mere Imperial Mausoleum in country Yao Chen? Mu Qinghe narrowed his eyes, and the scar on his face revealed a hint of fierceness. Chu Luiwei immediately felt a chill in his heart, so he obediently changed his tone. Please go ahead. With her current status, wouldn't she be looking for trouble if she asked Mu Qinghe for a reason? Since she was already here, she might as well go in with Mu Qinghe and see what he wanted to do. Seeing that Chu Luiwei was finally obedient, Mu Qinghe retracted his gaze. He raised his right hand, and several silver rays quickly gathered, finally condensing into a strange pattern in his palm. Chu Luiwei quickly glanced at it and found that the pattern was somewhat familiar, as if he had seen it somewhere before. But soon, Mu Qinghe pushed her hand forward, and the silver pattern immediately flew out. Buzz. A faint buzzing sound could be heard. Ripples suddenly appeared in the void in front of him. It was the barrier that enveloped the entire Golden Inheritance Peak. The moment the silver pattern touched the ripples on the barrier, the buzzing sound suddenly disappeared, and even the ripples were instantly frozen. In the next moment, the silver pattern quickly melted and silently seeped into the barrier. A crack immediately appeared in the middle of the frozen enchantment, and then it spread in all directions. Finally, a round entrance with a faint silver glow appeared in front of the two of them. Chu Luiwei was slightly shocked. The Golden Inheritance Peak's barrier was not of a low grade, and its defensive power was also very strong. It was impossible to break through it so smoothly using ordinary methods. Generally speaking, only a specific item that was compatible with the barrier could open it completely without causing any ripples. Mu Qinghe obviously did not possess the key to country Yao Chen's Imperial Mausoleum's barrier, but the scene before her eyes, Chu Luiwei suddenly recalled that when she went to look for Mu Qinghe a few days ago, he was not at home. She did not pay much attention to it at that time, but now that she thought about it, she felt that it was a little strange. It was obviously not Mu Qinghe's first time here. It could be seen that he had put in a lot of effort in order to enter the Imperial Mausoleum. Chu Luiwei's mind raced, but her face was calm. Mu Qinghe turned around and glanced at her with a hint of scrutiny in his eyes. After a moment, he turned around and walked forward. Follow me. Chu Luiwei took a deep breath and looked up at the steep mountain peak again, as well as the faintly discernible barrier. There were at least 100 guards guarding Golden Inheritance Peak, and there were definitely experts overseeing it. But now that the barrier had been opened, they probably did not notice anything. She suppressed her thoughts and stepped over the barrier. Palace, Empress's bedroom. Faced with Rongjio's question, the Empress lowered her head and did not say a word. Rongjio was not surprised by her reaction. In actual fact, even though he did not personally interrogate the Empress during these few days, it did not mean that he did not know anything. Ever since they returned from Heptagon Alley, the Empress had been like this. It seemed like she had gone crazy again. Rongjio was too lazy to waste time and directly asked her, "Her Majesty, I heard that you have an extremely precious box?" Once this was said, the Empress seemed to be greatly agitated as she suddenly looked up. "What box? I don't have it. I don't know." Rongjio lightly said, "The people around you have already spilled the beans, yet you're still unwilling to admit it?" The Empress was stunned and instantly guessed a little. She had always kept that item very carefully. After so many years, it was only broken by a eunuch once. Even though that eunuch only glanced at it unintentionally and did not know anything, the Empress still killed him. She originally thought that it was foolproof, but she did not expect there to be a loophole. That eunuch must have told the others before he died. Rongjio had captured all the people in the palace and interrogated them these few days. I don't know what ruthless methods he used, but he actually managed to get this out. Seeing the Empress's resistance and that she still wanted to deny it, Rongjio straightforwardly said, "Father already knows. He told me to tell you this. He told me to tell you that if you hand over the box obediently, everything will be fine. But if you're unwilling, I'm afraid you can't bear the consequences." The Empress was filled with hatred. "I should have gotten someone to kill you in the Northwest Army back then." Back then, she killed Rongjio's birth mother and originally wanted to kill Rongjio. However, she coincidentally met with Consort Wan's death, and Emperor Jiaowen was in deep sorrow. Hence, she could not do anything, so she did not do anything. Who knew that Rongjio would rather go to the Northwest Army and train himself thousands of miles away? She thought that it was tough at the borders and that it was hard to predict life and death on the battlefield. Perhaps Rongjio would die there very quickly, so she gradually let go of this matter. Later on, when Rongjio had outstanding military achievements and rose up the ranks, it was very difficult for her to take action. Now, Rongjio was clearly here to take revenge on her. Rongjio did not care about the Empress's complaints. "It seems like you're unwilling to hand over the item. I'll report to father now." Then he really turned around and left. The Empress was dazed. She originally thought that Rongjio would interrogate her strictly, but she did not expect him to let her off so easily. Actually, Rongjio had other thoughts in his heart. The Empress had held on for so long, but she did not say anything. It was obvious that she was prepared to die. Even if he interrogated the Empress here for an entire day and tortured her until she was half dead, it would be very difficult for him to get anything out of her. The Empress only had one weakness, Rongjin. "Oh right. After I go back, I'll ask father to give you a way out and let brother come and see you. We're mother and son, so I believe father won't be so heartless. Let them see each other's current appearance." That scene would definitely be very exciting. Before the Empress could react, a soft sound came from behind the screen at the side. Rongjio paused in his footsteps and turned around with a knife-like gaze. "Who's there?" Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 387. Nobody responded. Rongjio knitted his brows and stared at that spot for quite a while before suddenly turning around and walking toward the screen. The Empress has been locked up here alone for the past few days, and the outside is heavily guarded. It's impossible for anyone else to enter. The sound of footsteps resounded in the empty and deathly silent hall, almost suffocating everyone. Just as Rongjio was about to walk over, a macaw suddenly flew out. Rongjio immediately took action. A force turned into a sharp arrow, and it directly pierced through the macaw's stomach. Fresh blood splattered everywhere. That macaw immediately landed on the floor, and its body suddenly twitched twice before it stopped moving. Rongjio knitted his brows. He recognized this macaw as the Empress's pet. He didn't expect such a thing to be left in this palace. Suddenly, Rongjio focused his gaze and saw something hidden in the macaw's broken stomach. He immediately bent over and took a closer look. Then, he took out the item hidden inside. It was a black ball. This item was only the size of a fingernail and looked very normal. However, Rongjio's expression became increasingly stern. This was because he recognized this black ball. This item was also known as an ink pearl. It looked like a normal black ball, but it could actually be used to transmit information. As long as one used a special method to decode it, one could obtain the information hidden inside. When he was in the military previously, he had also used such a method. However, this item was very rare, and each ink pearl could only be used once, so he didn't use it many times. He didn't expect this to be hidden in the Empress's macaw's stomach. It was obvious what she wanted. He looked at the Empress and indeed saw her pale face as if she was in complete despair. I didn't expect Her Majesty to have such methods. Don't worry, I'll pass this ink pearl to Father for him to take a closer look. Then, Rongjio didn't stay any longer and quickly left the palace. After a long while, the Empress slowly covered her face. She had no more tears, only excruciating pain. After an unknown period of time, a gentle voice whispered into his ear. Her Majesty, Xing Qin is willing to help you. If you have any requests, just let me know. Princely Mansion. Rongjio looked at the sky and narrowed his eyes. In the past few days, you would come to Prince Li's residence at this time every time. But today, for some unknown reason, she was late. Umo, who was serving at the side, seemed to have guessed what he was thinking. Master, Miss Lu Yu went to Vice Admiral Mu's place today. She must have been delayed by something. What can he have? Rongjio said indifferently, then suddenly paused. Is Mu Qinghe in the residence today? Umo was stunned. I don't know either. Mu Qinghe was not an ordinary person. It was very difficult to monitor him. In the past few days, he seemed to be more alert than before. Umo was worried that he would alert the enemy, so he withdrew most of the people who were secretly monitoring him. Rongjio's expression turned cold. He suddenly stood up. Find out where Mu Qinghe is right now. Yes. When Umo heard Rongjio's words, he suddenly reacted. Could it be that Master suspected that Mu Qinghe took Miss Lu Yu away? Master, we have people at the Imperial City Gate. If there is any movement, they should send a message. If Mu Qinghe doesn't want them to know, he naturally has a way. Rongjio's voice was cold, and there seemed to be a trace of coldness between his eyebrows. Umo's heart trembled. I know I was wrong. Before he could finish his words, Rongjio, who had just taken 2 steps, suddenly stopped and looked up at the sky. Umo looked up in puzzlement, but he saw a tall figure approaching quickly. He was flying in the sky. His movements seemed slow and relaxed, but his speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, he was already above Prince Li's residence. Umo was about to go forward, but he saw Rongjio pressing his hand down. Only then did he restrain himself, but his eyes were still fixed on the approaching person. Almost at the same time, the approaching person also stopped. Jian Fengqi raised his sword-like eyebrows slightly and looked down with surprise. He originally thought that Prince Li's residence was just an ordinary house, but after coming here he found that the internal and external defense here was much stronger than expected. Ordinary people would not be able to see anything from the outside. But with his eyesight he had just approached and felt an unusual aura. So he simply gave up on visiting from the front door and chose another more direct way. After looking in the sky for a while, he finally confirmed his guess. In this huge Prince Li's residence, in addition to the tight defense, there was actually an extremely powerful Xian formation. He was very clear that if he continued to move forward, there would be a lot of trouble waiting for him. Jian Fengqi had always hated trouble, so he very consciously stopped. Anyway, he came today just to see what the rumored Rongjio looked like. So he stood in the air, one hand behind his back, and said with a smile, "This one is Jian Fengqi, and I'm here to pay a visit to Prince Li." Umo's whole body tensed up. Jian Fengqi? Wasn't that the celestial physician that Mu Qinghe invited from the Tianling dynasty? The news that he had cured the princess consort of Pingjiang some time ago had spread like wildfire in the imperial capital. Many people tried to find ways to meet him, but this Jian Fengqi was very arrogant and refused all of them, not even meeting a single one. After all, it was normal for a celestial physician with such a background to be arrogant. But what was even more amazing was that he could be said to be elusive. Many people waited day and night, but still could not catch a glimpse of him. Why did such a person suddenly come to Prince Li's residence today? And he even said that he wanted to meet the master? Jian Fengqi's eyes suddenly focused as soon as he finished speaking. A young man in white stood in the middle of the courtyard. He looked to be about 17 or 18 years old, and his snow-white clothes seemed to be even whiter than the snow in the mountains. Just by standing there, he seemed to have gathered all the light, making people involuntarily focus their attention on him. His appearance was noble and unparalleled, and his charm was unparalleled. Jian Fengqi believed that his appearance and temperament were top-notch, but when he saw the appearance of this young man in white, he instantly understood what it meant to feel inferior. In an instant, he understood Mu Hongyu's words. Not to mention country Yaochen, even in the Tianling dynasty, this young man's charm was almost unparalleled. Even Jiang Yuqing's thing was instantly at a disadvantage. Rong Xiu's voice was cold as he said indifferently, "May I know why young Master Jian is looking for me?" Jian Fengqi suddenly narrowed his eyes. "Your Highness, have we met somewhere before?" Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 388. Jian Fengqi didn't know why he had this thought. He was sure that he had never seen Rong Xiu's face before, but when Rong Xiu spoke, that noble, calm, and somewhat languid appearance suddenly felt somewhat familiar. That was why he blurted out that question. A warm and distant smile appeared on Rong Xiu's face. "Why do you say that, young Master Jian?" "I've been recuperating at Mingyue Tianshan and have only returned to the imperial capital in the past few months. I've been living in seclusion. I don't remember seeing young Master Jian before." Hearing this, Jian Fengqi was a little hesitant. Was it really just an illusion? But he had never had such a feeling before. No matter who it was, he had a photographic memory and clearly remembered all the details of the other party. No, there was another person who made him have a similar feeling before. Chu Luiyue. However, Chu Luiyue at least had eyes that were extremely similar to that person's, so it was normal for him to feel familiar. Didn't even Mu Qinghe think so? Even Hong Yao treated Chu Luiyue differently. But Rong Xiu wasn't. This face was clearly unfamiliar to him. But that aura, it seems that I remembered wrongly. But it seems that I have quite the affinity with Prince Li. As Jian Fengqi spoke, he secretly sighed in his heart. There was such a person in the imperial capital, but he didn't notice it at all before. It wasn't just him. Obviously, even the people in country Yaochen thought that Rong Xiu was just a sickly person who couldn't even leave the residence. His Highness Prince Li was really good at hiding his strength. I came here today for no other reason than to hear Mu Hongyu mention it unintentionally. I was curious, so I specially came to meet him. Also, I want to see what kind of person Chu Liyue's fiancé is. Jian Fengqi's words were too straightforward and even seemed a bit provocative. But according to his status, there seemed to be nothing wrong with what he said. After all, even Emperor Zhouwen had to be polite to him. When Rong Xiu heard him mention Chu Liyue, his eyes flickered. "You went to Vice Admiral Mu's place today. If young Master Jian wishes to see this prince, you can just inform him. This prince will specially invite young Master Jian to be a distinguished guest." Now that they were here, Prince Li's mansion might not be able to entertain them well. Jian Fengqi laughed. This young master has never liked to trouble others. I'll just take care of this small matter myself. Besides, she might not have the time today. Rong Xiu had a thought. Jian Fengqi suddenly realized something and looked at Rong Xiu with a serious expression. Shortly after, the smile at the corner of his mouth deepened and was tainted with a trace of evil. "So Prince Li is trying to get information from me?" Rong Xiu's expression didn't change. Jian Fengqi was a smart person, and some superficial skills couldn't be hidden from his eyes. Hence, there was no need for him to pretend. "Young Master Jian, please tell me where you is now." Rong Jiu returned to the imperial study and presented the ink pearl to Emperor Zhouwen. Emperor Zhouwen held the ink pearl and looked at it for a while before he knitted his brows. "Do you know how to break this thing?" Rong Jiu paused and said, "There are two types of ink pearls. There are two ways to break the ink pearl. However, I've already tried it before, and it didn't work." It was obvious that the Empress's shocking secret was hidden inside. Once it was broken, the Empress's side would most likely collapse. However, he quickly realized that this ink pearl was different from normal ink pearls. With his own abilities, he couldn't break the contents at all. "There seems to be a special seal on this ink pearl, but I'm useless and can't recognize it. Emperor Jianghu stared at the ink pearl and fell into deep thought. If even you can't do it? I'm afraid it's a little troublesome. Rongjio had many years of experience in the military, so he should be the best at dealing with such things. However, even he couldn't do anything about it, let alone the others. Looking at Emperor Jianghu's troubled look, Rongjio thought for a while and said, Tian Lu is an expert from the Imperial Study Academy. Tian Lu Academy's dean, Elder Yi, is very knowledgeable. Emperor Jianghu paused and shook his head. This is a serious matter, so it's better to be careful. You also have to be careful on your side and not leak any information. Doubts flashed across Rongjio's heart. This matter involves the Empress and the Crown Prince, so it's right for father to be careful. But isn't he being too careful? What kind of person is Elder Yi? Yet, father doesn't even want to tell him. It's as if he's afraid of something. However, Rongjio was a smart person. Since he could tell what Emperor Jianghu was thinking, he would naturally go along with it. You can leave first. Emperor Jianghu put away the ink pearl, leaned against the chair, and waved his hands tiredly. Rongjio wanted to say something but stopped himself. He wanted to take the ink pearl back and study it in detail, but he swallowed his words in the end. I'll take my leave. After leaving the palace, Rongjio was still thinking about the ink pearl. Father seems to value that item a lot, but if he can't crack it himself, isn't it useless? Father have other thoughts? The more Rongjio thought about it, the more uncomfortable he felt. Ever since Heptagon Alley, father's reaction has been very strange. He seemed to know something, but he kept it a secret and only told them to investigate the Empress. Now that the ink pearl incident was out, it was even more obvious. Rongjio was walking when he suddenly felt that someone was walking toward him. He couldn't help but look up. The person was a slender woman, but most of her face was covered by a white veil. Rongjio secretly knitted his brows. It's actually Chu Xianmin? She's here to find me? As expected, Chu Xianmin stopped when she was 3 steps away from him and curtsied. Greetings, Third Prince. Chu Xianmin? What are you doing here? Even though Rongjio wasn't very familiar with Chu Xianmin, he had heard quite a bit of news about her when he returned to the imperial city. She was Rongjin's concubine. Xianmin has something to discuss with the third prince. Rongjio knitted his brows. What can Chu Xianmin say to me? Could it be, if you're here to plead for the crown prince, you can go back now? Chu Xianmin lightly shook her head. Third prince, you're mistaken. Even though I'm the crown prince's subordinate, I know the severity of the situation. I'm here today because I have something to tell you. I've been conflicted about this for a long time, but after thinking about it, I still think it's better to tell you. The feeling in Rongjio's heart grew stronger. But I have a request. Please don't let anyone know that I'm the one who told you this. Chu Xianmin tightly gripped the handkerchief in her hands as if she was very nervous and worried. Rongjio said, Okay, just say it. Chu Xianmin hesitated for a moment before she lowered her voice and said, Previously, I heard the crown prince discussing with eldest princess Situ. He said that he wanted her help to find a way to enter the palace and meet the empress. It should be within these 2 days. Rongjio's heart skipped a beat. He suddenly remembered the strange sound he heard in the empress's palace. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from iYuan. Chapter 389. Golden Inheritance Peak. Chu Luiyue followed Mu Qinghe forward. The surrounding forest was verdant and lush, perfectly concealing the two of them. Other than the occasional sound of the wind blowing the leaves, the surroundings were silent. Soon, a flight of stairs appeared in front of the two of them. Chu Luiyue looked up. Layers of stairs were stacked on top of each other, extending from the foot of the mountain to the top. At a glance, it was almost impossible to see the end. It was said that there were a total of 999 steps on this flight of stairs. Golden Inheritance Peak was steep, and it was imaginable how much manpower and resources were needed to build such a flight of stairs. At the top of the mountain was the place where country Yao Chen's emperor worshipped his ancestors every year. Other than the emperor, Even the Empress didn't have the qualifications to climb to the top of the stairs. She could only stay at the bottom and wait quietly. Chu Luiyue couldn't help but glance at Mu Qinghe in front of him. Don't tell me he wants to go to the top. Furthermore, he previously said that he wanted to enter the Imperial Mausoleum. Chu Luiyue only thought of a problem now. Where is the entrance to the Imperial Mausoleum? Golden Inheritance Peak was surrounded by strict guards, and there was only one flight of stairs on the way up. The Imperial Mausoleum was buried under Golden Inheritance Peak. After walking for such a distance, she didn't find any suspicious places that could be used as an entrance. Other than the trees, there were only rocks. Mu Qinghe continued to walk up, and Chu Luiyue could only continue to follow. The two of them weren't slow, and it didn't take long for them to reach the middle of the mountain. At this point, Mu Qinghe finally turned back to look at Chu Luiyue. Other than her slightly flushed cheeks and some fine beads of sweat on her forehead, she didn't look tired at all. This was absolutely impossible for an ordinary rank 2 warrior to do. But to Chu Luiyue, it didn't seem to be a difficult task. Vice Admiral Mu, what's the matter? Chu Luiyue saw that she had stopped and couldn't help but ask curiously. Mu Qinghe said ambiguously, "The strength of your physical body is even stronger than I had expected." Chu Luiyue coughed. Actually, she had also noticed this. Not to mention martial artists of the same level, even cultivators of a higher level than her might not be able to match her in this aspect. And this was not something that could be explained by talent. If he wanted to obtain a stronger physical body, he would have to cultivate diligently. Sometimes, he would also need some natural treasures to assist him. Mu Qinghe knew this very well. Perhaps she was starting to have doubts in her heart. Just as Chu Luiyue was thinking about how to deal with him, he saw that he didn't say anything and continued to walk up. Chu Luiyue didn't say anything and just followed behind him at a leisurely pace. She vaguely felt that Mu Qinghe seemed to be a little anxious. Why was he in such a hurry? Time passed by bit. Chu Luiyue and Mu Qinghe finally finished half of the stairs. Chu Luiyue's heart trembled as she looked up at the mountain peak in front of her. There was actually an extremely powerful Xian formation at the top of the mountain. She didn't feel it earlier, but when she reached the last few steps, she could clearly feel that the pressure was rapidly increasing with every step she took. A trace of uneasiness faintly surfaced in her heart. However, Mu Qinghe didn't hesitate at all and stepped onto the last step. He reached the top of the mountain. The moment his foot landed, several rays of silver light instantly rose into the air. They swept towards Mu Qinghe. A cold light flashed in Mu Qinghe's hand and a long sword appeared. He quickly raised his sword and slashed down fiercely. Boom! A dull sound suddenly exploded at the top of the mountain. Bang! 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 The numerous streaks of silver light that had rushed to his body instantly dissipated. They transformed into countless rays of light. They scattered in all directions. He actually intended to forcefully break the Xian formation. The commotion at the top of the mountain immediately attracted the attention of the surrounding guards. Someone has trespassed on Golden Inheritance Peak. How is this possible? The barrier outside Golden Inheritance Peak didn't move at all, but the fluctuation just now did indeed come from the top of the mountain. As they spoke, numerous figures instantly rushed up into the air. At the same time, someone finally saw Mu Qinghe and Chu Luiyue's figures. There are 2 people at the top of the mountain. This caused everyone to be dumbfounded. Golden Inheritance Peak was heavily guarded. Who exactly was it that dared to silently barge in and even reach the top of the mountain? A black-robed elder shouted in a deep voice. Everyone listen up. Seal off Golden Inheritance Peak immediately. Don't let those 2 people escape. His deep and powerful voice reverberated mightily. Yes. The black-robed elder frowned and rushed forward, wanting to see who exactly those 2 people were. There weren't many people with such strength in country Yaochen, so he didn't know who was so audacious. Unfortunately, due to the cover of the forest on the mountain peak, he couldn't see the 2 people's faces. He could only vaguely recognize that they seemed to be a man and a woman. Boom, 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 boom. Right at this moment, a series of booming sounds came from the top of the mountain. The black-robed elder was shocked. The Xian formation on the mountain peak had actually been broken by the other party. That was a Xian formation that had been passed down for thousands of years in country Yaochen. How could it be broken so easily? The other party's strength was probably stronger than what he had imagined. Without hesitation, he took out a bamboo tube and injected some force into it. Then he suddenly threw it into the air. Boom! Bright and dazzling fireworks bloomed in the sky. At the same time, a deafening sound was heard. Chu Luiwei watched as Mu Qinghe raised her sword and slashed open a path. Frenzied energy fluctuations spread in all directions, almost suffocating her. Mu Qinghe stood in the middle of the turbulence, her clothes fluttering in the wind. Right at this moment, Chu Luiwei heard the shocking sound. When she looked up, she saw the huge fireworks. The other party had discovered them and was already requesting for reinforcements. Chu Luiwei gritted her teeth. Then she finally took the last step and reached the top of the mountain. Just as she was about to follow Mu Qinghe, the transparent water droplet in her dantian suddenly started to spin. An indescribable summoning suddenly came from beneath her feet. Chu Luiwei was shocked and immediately looked down. This power came from below the mountain. Before she could figure out what was going on, the ground beneath her feet suddenly moved. Chu Luiwei looked over and realized that she had unknowingly stepped on a huge circular plate. This circular plate was embedded on the top of the mountain. If one didn't look carefully, one wouldn't be able to distinguish it from the ground beside it. It was only at this moment that it started to spin slowly that it became especially obvious. In the next moment, Chu Luiwei's body instantly fell. Mu Qinghe sensed the movement behind her and finally turned around to take a look. She happened to see Chu Luiwei's figure disappear into the circular plate. A strange light flashed across her eyes. In the next moment, she jumped without hesitation. When the black-robed elder rushed over, he realized that there was a huge circular plate on the top of the mountain that was slowly rotating. He was shocked. The Imperial Mausoleum had actually been activated. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 390. Chu Luiwei's body kept falling. Her surroundings were dark, and she couldn't see anything. She could only hear the whistling of the wind. She tried to circulate her force, but she realized that the force in her body seemed to be suppressed, and it flowed very slowly. The surrounding air became more and more viscous, as if she had fallen into a swamp. Her falling speed also gradually slowed down. After an unknown amount of time, she finally landed on the solid ground. She looked around and groped her way up. The ground under her feet was cold and very smooth, as if it was paved with jade. She pursed her lips. There was no light source here, so she had no idea what was going on here. She had to think of something. She suddenly thought of something and raised her hand. A cluster of crimson-red smoke suddenly appeared in his palm. However, before Chu Luiwei could smile, the flames were quickly extinguished. The surroundings fell into darkness again. Chu Luiwei frowned. She had almost forgotten that she couldn't use her force here, so she naturally couldn't summon her force to transform into flames. She stood on the spot for a while without moving. She only pricked up her ears and listened carefully to the movements around her. Drip, drip. The sound of water dripping could be heard. Chu Luiwei subconsciously looked in the direction of the sound. Although she still couldn't see anything, the sound of water inexplicably made her feel more at ease. But the next moment, her heart suddenly hung in the air. It had been a while since she fell, so why hadn't she seen Mu Qinghe yet? She remembered that when she fell, Mu Qinghe was following her closely. But now, where was he? Moreover, what was even stranger was that below Golden Inheritance Peak was country Yaochen's Imperial Mausoleum. Why would there be the sound of water in the Imperial Mausoleum? Just as Chu Luiwei was deep in thought, she felt a weight on her shoulder. Dumpling came over. Unlike before, Dumpling seemed to be a little nervous as it nestled on her shoulder motionlessly. Chu Luiwei sensed its emotions and felt strange. Dumpling had always been bold. Even when facing the level 7 black-winged sky-swallowing python, She did not shrink back. She even dared to curse at the legendary three-eyed eagle. She had always been fearless. What happened this time? Chu Luiwei patted its head to comfort it. Dumpling grabbed her clothes and snuggled up to her tightly. Suddenly, Chu Luiwei had an idea. With a thought, something suddenly appeared in her palm. Heavenly Square Cauldron. This thing was small and exquisite, so it fit perfectly in her palm. And inside, the transparent karmic fire was burning. There was only a black shadow in the middle. That was the soul of the legendary three-eyed eagle. The surroundings were instantly illuminated by the flames. Chu Luiwei's lips curved up. It really works. Since this heavenly square sacred cauldron could suppress a divine beast, it must be extremely powerful. Chu Luiwei thought that perhaps the hellfire inside could resist the suppression here. The result was as expected. After a moment, the legendary three-eyed eagle's incredulous voice was heard. Why you actually used the heavenly square sacred cauldron to light up the place? Because of the shock, its voice was trembling slightly. It never expected that the first time it officially left Chu Luiwei's dantian would be in such a situation. Does Chu Luiwei know what the heavenly square sacred cauldron is? Make the best use of it. Chu Luiwei did not care at all, and her voice was light. The legendary three-eyed eagle was speechless. Chu Luiwei ignored it and looked around. The surroundings were empty. There was actually nothing. But the ground was actually paved with green and white jade. Chu Luiwei was slightly shocked. Green and white jade was very precious, but it was actually used to pave the ground here. And it seemed that it was not only used in this small area. Just this alone was worth more than a city. Country Yaochen actually used so much money to build the imperial mausoleum. It was really generous. I really don't know what it will be like inside. Chu Luiwei carefully felt the subtle calling and finally chose a direction and walked forward. In the silent space, Chu Luiwei's footsteps were exceptionally clear. Gradually, the sound of water dripping seemed to become louder. Chu Luiwei held the heavenly square sacred cauldron tightly in his hand and continued walking forward. Bang! Accompanied by a dull collision, the mace in the black-robed elder's hand finally could not withstand it and cracked. He anxiously threw the broken mace to the side and looked at the disc that was still spinning in front of him. It was not damaged at all. His face was filled with sorrow. Elder Zhongqi, this disc was personally forged by the ancestor. Ordinary items can't open it at all. That's right. Let's find another way. If it really doesn't work, I'm afraid we'll have to wait for His Majesty to come personally. The few people standing at the side finally could not help but speak. Zhongqi shouted in annoyance. Of course I know this. He had been guarding this place for decades. How could he not know this? But if they did not think of a solution as soon as possible, how were they going to explain it to His Majesty? Under heavy guard, someone actually trespassed into Golden Inheritance Peak and even climbed to the top to enter the Imperial Mausoleum. It would not be enough even if all of them died 100 times. Wait. If we really wait for His Majesty to come, everyone here will have to bear the consequences. The few of them looked at each other and fell silent. Zhongqi stared at the disc hatefully. Did anyone see the appearance of those two people just now? No one answered. Zhongqi closed his eyes. He was the fastest to rush over at that time. Even he did not see them, let alone the others. Everyone stay here and guard it. I don't believe that they won't come out. Huge fireworks bloomed in the sky above the imperial city. Rong Xiu's eyes narrowed as an extremely cold murderous intent flashed across his eyes. Mu Qinghe actually brought you to the imperial mausoleum. He immediately said, Young Master Jian, I still have something to deal with. I'll take my leave first today. After saying that, he lifted his feet and left. Jian Fengqi was stunned for a moment before he raised his head to look at the sky. What kind of signal was that just now? From the looks of it, the commotion caused was not small. He thought of something and the corners of his mouth curled up into an impudent smile. Prince Li, are you going to the place where the fireworks are released? It just so happens that I have nothing to do. How about I go with you? Rong Xiu suddenly looked back and quietly glanced at Jian Fengqi. In an instant, a biting cold and terrifying murderous intent swept toward Jian Fengqi. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 391. Jian Fengqi's body tensed up instinctively. Force quickly gathered in his palm. But in the next moment, the murderous intent disappeared inexplicably, as if it had never appeared. Rong Xiu smiled faintly. Please help yourself, young Master Jian. Then he turned around and left without hesitation. Jian Fengqi stood rooted to the ground for a while. What happened just now? At that moment, he only felt a strong murderous intent erupt from Rong Xiu, but it disappeared so quickly that he almost thought that he had seen wrongly. How could he make a mistake on such a matter? Looking at Rong Xiu's disappearing figure, Jian Fengqi raised his eyebrows slightly. This princely seems to be more unfathomable than I imagined. He turned around and looked at the fireworks in the sky. There was only one last trace of fireworks left. Everyone in the imperial capital could see it clearly. No matter who sent this signal, something big must have happened. Jian Fengqi touched his chin. Could it really be that Mu Qinghe caused the commotion? Thinking of this, he suddenly felt a little interested. Previously, when Mu Qinghe wanted to come to country Yaochen, he felt that it was a little strange. Even if the higher-ups ordered to find a genius with an Earth-class Yuan Meridian, with Mu Qinghe's status, there was no need for her to do it personally. She could just send someone to do it. But Mu Qinghe still came. And these few days, Mu Qinghe had been leaving early and returning late. He had no idea what she was doing. Thinking of this, he simply turned around and headed in that direction. Chu Luiwei held the heavenly square cauldron in her hand and slowly moved forward in the darkness. After walking for some time, she finally saw a wall. Chu Luiwei looked up to take a closer look and realized that it was really a dead end. The greenish-black stone wall completely blocked the path ahead. Chu Luiwei frowned slightly. Could it be that she had walked into a dead end? However, she soon realized that the sound of water droplets was coming from the stone wall in front of her. She moved closer and saw that there was a small semicircular hole above the stone wall. A metal cylinder poked out at an angle. Water droplets were flowing out from it, dripping down drop by drop. Patter! Patter! In the quiet space, the sound of water droplets was particularly clear. Chu Luiwei looked down and saw a shallow groove at the bottom of the stone wall. A bay of water quietly flowed within. Chu Luiwei looked to both sides and found that the groove extended all the way into the darkness, with no end in sight. She raised the heavenly square cauldron again. This time, she finally saw clearly that there seemed to be some kind of pattern drawn around the metal cylinder. Perhaps it was because of the passage of time, but the content on it could no longer be seen clearly. Only a vague outline was left. Chu Luiwei stared at it for a while, but he was still unable to determine what it was. He could only put it aside for the time being. The most important thing at the moment was to find a way to leave this place. Chu Luiwei knocked on the stone wall and found that it was indeed solid and extraordinarily thick. It was definitely not something that she could break open by force alone. Then she carefully checked it again, but did not find any mechanism. Could it be that she could only go back the way she came? Chu Luiwei frowned. She clearly felt that there was something behind the stone wall that was attracting her. She was unwilling to give up just like that. Besides, even if she went back, how was she going to return to the top of the mountain? Not to mention that she could not fly now. Even if she could, this strange space suppression would prevent her from using it. Patter! Patter! The water droplets fell at a very uniform speed. Chu Luiwei looked at the metal cylinder again. If the water was flowing out from inside, then what kind of scene was it inside? All of a sudden, Tuanzi jumped onto the metal cylinder. Chu Luiwei's eyes twitched. Dumpling! You can't bite this casually. Who knew what was going on in the Imperial Mausoleum? If they rashly destroyed the stone wall, it might cause trouble. There had always been many things to pay attention to in the mausoleum, especially in the Imperial Mausoleum. It could be said that it was filled with traps. Chu Luiwei did not want to lose her life here. Dumpling shook its head, a look of disdain in its eyes. I have a lot of requirements, okay? Why would I just bite anything I see? Then, Dumpling pointed at the metal cylinder under its feet and hugged it with its claws. Chu Luiwei suddenly understood. You want me to turn this thing? Dumpling immediately nodded excitedly. Chu Luiwei hesitated. This thing shouldn't be moved, right? Although she said that, she still stretched out her hand. The metal cylinder was cold to the touch, and a chill instantly spread to the bottom of her heart. Chu Luiwei held her breath and focused, gently turning it. The metal cylinder actually moved. Chu Luiwei suppressed the shock in her heart and slowly turned it along with the force. When the metal cylinder turned 180 degrees, Chu Luiwei finally heard a crisp sound. It seemed to be the sound of the built-in buckle fitting. Chu Luiwei let go of her hand, and in the next moment, on the stone wall in front of her, golden starlight suddenly appeared. Those starlight were like stars in the dark night, bright and dazzling. Chu Luiwei raised her hand to cover her eyes, but from the corner of her eye, she saw that the golden starlight gradually connected into a line. Then, a huge and strange pattern was drawn. Chu Luiwei was shocked. This was clearly the blurry pattern she saw earlier. At this moment, the light lit up and the outline gradually became clear. Chu Luiwei's heart seemed to be tightly grasped by something, and she stared at it without blinking. That was boom. Before she could see it clearly, the stone wall suddenly split from the middle of the metal cylinder. A dazzling white light shot out from it. Chu Luiwei's eyes instantly turned white. Dumpling jumped back onto her shoulder and grabbed her clothes tightly. After a while, the surrounding movements gradually quieted down. Chu Luiwei also gradually adapted to the white light, and she focused her eyes to look inside. When she saw the scene in front of her, she finally couldn't help but gasp. He saw a wide river flickering with silver light flowing through the sky. The starlight in the river shone brightly, illuminating the entire space. Just now, when Chu Luiwei opened the stone wall, the white light she felt came from here. Chu Luiwei opened her eyes wide in shock. That river floated in the air, clear and clean, but also shining brightly. At a glance, it looked like the Milky Way in the dark night. Dazzling and magnificent. At the bottom of the river, there was a spacious square. A lonely golden throne was quietly placed in the center. However, that wasn't what shocked Chu Luiwei the most. That was because a man was sitting on that golden throne. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 392. There was actually someone in the Imperial Mausoleum that had been sealed for thousands of years? Chu Luiwei was shocked. At the same time, she quickly sized up the man. After seeing him clearly, she realized that something was wrong. This man did not seem to be a living person. He was tall and wore a black robe with golden dragon patterns embroidered on his chest and cuffs. He looked noble and dignified. At a glance, this man was about 40 years old, but he was elegant and had an outstanding temperament. It could still be seen that when he was young, he must have been a rare handsome man. It was just that his eye sockets were actually pure black. Chu Luiwei could not help but stare at those eyes. They were two dark vortexes. On the surface, they looked calm and peaceful, but in the depths, one could see the changes of life and death and the disappearance of stars. Who are you? The man looked at Chu Luiwei and slowly asked in a deep voice. Chu Luiwei's mind suddenly became drowsy. Waves of fatigue surged up, and her entire mind seemed to relax. Chu Luiwei, she replied in a low voice. The large space suddenly quieted down. After a moment, the man asked again. No, you are not Chu Luiwei. His voice seemed to carry some kind of indescribable power. It fell heavily in her ears and reached the bottom of her heart. Chu Luiwei shook her head. Her voice was firm. I am Chu Luiwei. This body, this appearance, if she was not Chu Luiwei, who was she? The man suddenly laughed as if he had heard a joke. Look up. Chu Luiwei looked up and saw the slowly flowing river across the sky. Countless stars were reflected in her eyes, making her look resplendent. Suddenly, those lights dissipated. The river swayed, and a scene seemed to appear in front of her. Chu Liuyue's brows furrowed. It was a cliff. On the cliff that extended from the cliff, there was an octagonal pavilion. The white mountain mist drifted here and there, adding a bit of spiritual energy to this precipitous land. In the octagonal pavilion, a black-clothed man stood with his hands behind his back. The mountain wind blew, lifting up the corners of his clothes. He looked like an immortal who was about to fly away with the wind. Chu Liyue looked at his back and felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. She seemed to have seen this person before. When she saw the cliff and the octagonal pavilion, she didn't feel any sense of unfamiliarity. It was as if she had already been there. There seemed to be something surging at the bottom of her heart, as if it was about to break out, but she couldn't make it clear. This made her feel like her heart was in a mess, adding to her anxiety for no reason. She opened her mouth, as if she wanted to call out the black-clothed man's name. But she seemed to have become a mute, unable to make a sound. There seemed to be a ball of fire burning in the bottom of her heart, making her extremely anxious. Chu Liyue anxiously wanted to speak, but just as he managed to spit out a word, he saw the black-clothed man suddenly turn sideways. Chu Liyue suddenly paused and stared intently. However, just as she was about to see the man's face, she suddenly felt a sharp pain in her hand. Chu Liyue was jolted awake. Looking down, she realized that Dumpling had bitten her hand hard. Dark red blood gradually seeped out of the wound, waking her up completely. What happened to her just now? She actually fell into the other party's dangerous situation so easily. Dumpling, thank you. Just now I almost, Chu Liyue said softly, but suddenly stopped. Almost what? Why was she rejoicing in the depths of her heart? This feeling rarely appeared to her. Usually, she would only feel this way when she was trying to avoid making a big mistake. But, in that situation just now, although her mental defenses were almost broken, it didn't seem to have anything to do with her biggest secret. Why did she have the illusion that she had survived a disaster? Chu Liyue looked up again. The suspended river had returned to its original state, and the scene on it had completely disappeared, as if it had never appeared. Including that cliff, that octagonal pavilion, and that man. Chu Liyue pursed her lips. She was so eager to see the man's appearance. This had never happened before. She suppressed the waves in her heart, clenched her fists, and looked at the man on the throne. Do you think that you can trap me with such an illusion? The black-clothed man's face revealed a meaningful smile. Do you think that was an illusion? Chu Liyue's heart sank. All the scenes that appeared in the weak water came from your memory. Whatever you are thinking, it will naturally reflect what you are thinking. A low and slow voice sounded, and every word was like a clap of thunder. Chu Liyue's body tensed up. If that was the case, the scene she saw just now was real? But in her past life and present life, there was no such scene in the memory of her two lives. I don't even know your identity, how can I believe what you say? Chu Liyue sneered. I can be sure that I have never seen that scene. Your method of lying is a little too clumsy. Are you really sure? The man seemed unmoved, and calmly continued to ask. Chu Liyue's heart jumped, and she secretly gritted her teeth. Rationally, she believed that every word she said was correct, because she really did not remember that scene. However, in the depths of her heart, there was a faint uncertainty. Because everything she saw just now had an indescribable sense of familiarity. Especially the man standing with his hands behind his back. She only saw a back view, but had the urge to call his name. If she really had not seen it before, how could this be? You don't know my identity, but I know who you are. The black-clothed man raised his eyes, staring at Chu Liyue with a confident smile. It was as if everything was under his control. Who exactly are you? Chu Liyue shouted in a deep voice. You will naturally know when you find me. The man said, and suddenly stood up. I'll wait for you. Then, without waiting for Chu Liyue to react, his figure instantly turned into countless silver stars and flew into the river in midair. Without a trace. Chu Luwei came back to her senses after a while. That black-clothed man, left just like that? He said that he would find him. Where could she find him? She couldn't possibly enter that river too, right? On one hand, she couldn't go up at all. On the other hand, who knew what would happen if she entered? Chu Luwei pondered for a moment, and finally decided to continue forward, heading towards the throne in the middle. Other than the throne, there was nothing else here. If she couldn't find any clues on it, then she would really have a headache. Chu Luwei walked step by step, and finally stood in front of the throne. Suddenly, her eyes focused, and she carefully stared at the back of the throne. In the middle position, there was a line of words, "East of the weak water, gold." Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 393. In the palace. Rongjio took big strides toward the imperial study. All the palace maids he met on the way greeted him respectfully. Now that the crown prince and empress were under house arrest, His Majesty had handed many things to the third prince. Everyone could tell that the imperial city was about to change. But seeing Rongjio's tense face, the palace maids didn't dare to say anything as if something important had happened. Rongjio walked quickly, and he was frustrated. No matter how much I calculated, I didn't realize that Situ Xingchen was also in the Empress's palace back then. If I was more careful back then, I would have definitely noticed something amiss. Perhaps, I could have walked forward and pulled the screen aside to discover Situ Xingchen. I didn't. Things had been going too smoothly these few days, so I was so careless that I forgot about this person's existence. At first, I didn't care about it, but thinking about it now, I feel that there's something fishy going on. Situ Xingchen and Rong Jin had a marriage agreement, but she didn't ask to cancel it even after Rong Jin got into trouble. What else could it be if she didn't have a motive? Situ Xingchen must know something, so she's willing to help the Empress and Rong Jin. I actually didn't think of checking on Situ Xingchen before this. Before he reached the imperial study, Rongjio heard hurried footsteps in front of him. He looked up and saw Emperor Jiuan, who was walking at the very front. Emperor Jiuan's expression was dark and vicious, which he had never seen before, and it had an intense murderous aura. Rongjio was shocked. What's going on now? Greetings, father. Rongjio quickly walked forward and bowed. Emperor Jiuan saw Rongjio and knitted his brows. Why are you still in the palace? At this time, Rongjio should have left the palace. Rongjio immediately said, Father, I'm sorry. Imperial father, I have returned because I have something important to tell you immediately. Emperor Jiuan didn't stop and continued walking forward. Wait for me to come back. As he spoke, he had already walked past Rongjio. Rongjio was dazed. What's going on? Father, I really have something urgent. Third prince, you should wait first. Eunuch Min walked to Rongjio's side, waved his horsetail whisk, and persuaded him. Can't you see how anxious His Majesty is right now? In short, His Majesty is definitely not in the mood to listen to what you have to say. Please wait patiently for now. Rongjio asked suspiciously. Eunuch Min, please give me some pointers. Imperial father seems to be in a hurry. What exactly is he going to do? You still don't know? Eunuch Min blurted out in shock. He quickly looked around, pointed to the sky, and said in a low voice, That's right. You didn't see the commotion just now? Rongjio was dazed for a moment before he understood. That's news from the Imperial Mausoleum. How could His Majesty not be anxious? Eunuch Min slapped his thigh. This old servant has to leave now. Your Highness, you should do as you see fit. Eunuch Min then immediately chased after Emperor Jiuan. Rongjio stood rooted to the ground as his heart stirred. After his conversation with Chu Xianmin, he was filled with shock, anger, and regret. He didn't have time to think before he returned to the palace. When he walked on the road, he also noticed the gigantic firework. Of course, he knew that it was used to send messages, but he didn't realize that it was a warning from the Imperial Mausoleum because all his attention was on Situ Xingchen. This meant that something had happened to the imperial mausoleum. Even though Rongjio wasn't in the imperial city most of the time, he knew that Golden Inheritance Peak, where the imperial mausoleum was, had always been heavily guarded. Now that they suddenly received this news, they must have met with big trouble. It would be strange if Emperor Jiawen wasn't anxious. Just as Rongjio was thinking about whether he should go back to the Empress's palace to take a look and confirm if Situ Xingqian had gone there, Emperor Jiawen, who had just left, was stopped by someone again. This time, the person who came was a guard in armor. He rushed all the way here with a panicked expression as he directly knelt in front of Emperor Jiawen and miserably shouted, "Your Highness! Your Majesty! Bad news!" Emperor Jiawen felt that his head was heavily hammered, and his head hurt. Bad news? Something has happened to the imperial mausoleum. What could be worse than this? Speak! Hollered Emperor Jiawen as he was forced to stand still. That guard knelt on the floor, and his body shivered. "Your Majesty, Her Majesty? Her Majesty has passed away." The surroundings suddenly fell into dead silence. Emperor Jiawen's expression froze. Upon hearing this, Rongjio looked up and saw that the guard was indeed the person in charge of guarding the Empress's palace. Did he just say that the Empress has passed away? An ominous feeling surged in Rongjio's heart. He hurriedly walked to that guard's side. "What did you just say?" "Say it again." That guard was shocked by his sudden questioning as he shivered and said with a trembling voice, "Her Majesty! Her Majesty! Her Majesty killed herself." Useless. Emperor Jiawen finally reacted as he harshly kicked that guard's heart. "Didn't I say that no matter what, I have to take good care of the Empress? It wouldn't be enough even if the Empress died 1,000 times for what she did." However, he still had many things that he hadn't asked clearly. Now that she suddenly died, what should he do next? "What exactly did you do?" That guard endured the pain as he fearfully said, "Your Majesty, we've been guarding outside the palace. Your Majesty, we've been standing guard outside, and we'll go in to check every hour." But Her Majesty actually hit the wall for some reason. When we heard the commotion, Her Majesty was already... Actually, we're also very wronged. The Empress has been in the same state for the past few days. Even if she's going through excruciating torture, she's still holding on. Who would have thought that she would suddenly kill herself? She was determined, and she hit the wall very harshly. Her face and head were all covered in blood, and her skull was about to split open. How could we have predicted this? Emperor Jiawen was already anxious because of what happened to the imperial mausoleum. Now that he heard this news, he felt the blood in his chest rumble as he spat out a mouthful of blood. "Your Majesty! Father!" Eunuch Min and Rongjio immediately gasped. Eunuch Min was originally standing beside Emperor Jiawen, and he hurriedly supported his shaky body. "Your Majesty! You must take care of your body." Under the contrast of the blood at the corner of his lips, Emperor Jiawen's face looked even paler. He stared at that guard with a deadly gaze and enunciated every word clearly. "Who went to the Empress's palace today? I'm certain that the Empress didn't suddenly commit suicide. There must be a deeper reason behind this." A thought suddenly flashed across Rongjio's mind. Could it be Situ Xingqian? That guard's voice trembled. "Why, Your Majesty, today, only the third prince went to the Empress's palace alone." Rongjio was shocked. He suddenly turned to look at that guard. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.